Hi, this is Dan Heisman, Philly tutor for Chess FM. This is the Improve Your Chess video series for ICC members. In today's game, we're going to look at a 30-30 game that was played, I believe, here on the ICC. This is one of those games where we see amateur players making one of the most common mistakes, which is simply not trying to use all their time, especially in critical positions. We see this over and over again. One of the bigger differences between better players and weaker players is better players try their hardest on every move. It only takes one bad move to lose the game. If you go to any big tournament, you'll see that people above, let's say, 1800, take their whole time for the game. And on the other side of the room where the people below 1800 are playing, that's where the part of the room that empties out the fastest. So even though better players can think faster and more accurately, they also take almost all their time every game because they're trying to do the very best you can. And that's the only way you can really be a good player. And you can't take games off, whether they're here or there. You practice what you actually do when it really counts. So you have to try your hardest on every move of every game. If it's a fast game, you're not going to think very long. If it's a slow game, you have a lot more time and you're going to try to use all your clock. So let's watch the two players in this game and we'll see their time management. And it's quite terrible, but we've seen a lot of games like that where people play way too fast for what's going on. And of course, that leads to a lot of silly mistakes, but it also leads to people playing a lot lower than what they could if they tried their best on every move. All right, so white opens with d4 and black plays d5. And now the most common move, of course, is c4, Queen's Gambit. The second most common is knight f3. Those aren't the only moves, but they're the most common. For instance, bishop f4 would be a London system. White plays f4. And now the first thing I think of is, okay, he's setting up to play a stonewall system. All right, and black plays f5. Unusual. Usually black will not play a stonewall pattern back against white's stonewall pattern. He'll play something like knight to f6 and try to go right away for the weakened d4 square. Black plays that move, and by the way, black played that move in 3 seconds. Now, I'll play a move in 3 seconds in the opening if it's a book move, but I bet after f4 that black was kind of out of his book. I can't believe he has a book like for d4, d5, f4, or if he does, he's probably a really strong player. And that means you should be thinking already. But here, when faced with an unusual move, black essentially moved immediately as a 30-second increment, and he took 3 seconds. His clock went up by 27 seconds. All right, so now black has also created a very weak square here on e5, so both sides have a big weak square in the middle of the board. White plays e3. That's consistent with a stonewall. Then black plays knight f6, knight f3, e6, so we have a symmetric position. White can either now play a stonewall or he can go for something a little more aggressive with a break move like in a Queen's Gambit. He could play c4 here. Instead, he plays a pretty unusual move. He plays bishop e2. Usually, white will fight for the possibility of taking on e4 when the knight goes there. Certainly, he's not worried about a bishop pinning his knight for quite a while on this diagonal. So bishop e2 is a strange move. But again, if we're looking at the clocks, 6 seconds for that move. So obviously, even though white had a lot of other possibilities, he just pretty much is playing the first move he sees, which is characteristic of a speed game, but not very good when you're playing a 30-30 game. All right, so black plays knight c6, a little bit unusual also, blocking his break move of c5 and also even the possibility of playing c6. It's not a terrible move, but it is a little unusual. White already goes to occupy the center with knight e5. He could have just castled or moved the c-pawn. Black hits the knight again. Of course, now he can't take with the knight because when white takes back, he'll fork the bishop and the knight. So white moves the bishop again. Maybe this was his idea to give a check, but this check really doesn't do anything. Black will simply put the pawn in the way, and unless white wants to sacrifice a piece for 2 pawns, he's going to have to go back. So black does play g6. And now he could stop black from castling with knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes.